Most new cars today are remarkably advanced, especially when it comes to their interior technologies that contain incredible features from guided cruise control to massaging seats, and even autonomous driving. Now, while those feats may be astonishing, the same cannot be said for the next few expensive rides. The cars on this list, despite sometimes looking jaw-drop gorgeous on the outside, had interiors that look as if they were designed by a 2-year-old, have no intention to keep the driver's needs in mind, or were just downright cheap. To play devil's advocate for a moment here, some of these cars have no other purpose than to deem as hardcore sports cars, but that still doesn't justify their decision to ditch an air conditioner or a proper infotainment screen, for example. So here they are, the world's most expensive cars that come with a rather questionable interior space. McLaren is one of Britain's most prestigious auto manufacturers, and they specialize in creating some maniacal hypercars like the iconic McLaren F1, and for this list, we'll be shining the spotlight of shame on one of their newest models, the 720s, via Charlotte McLaren. Undoubtedly, it's a gorgeous, spaceship-looking speed demon with more than 700 HP at its disposal, but for some reason, McLaren has never been the best when it came to assembling interiors. Everything might have looked superb from afar, but once you set foot inside, you'll notice some poorly finished stitching, inconsistent panel gaps, and many more imprecise details no one would expect from a $300,000 hypercar. 9 Tesla Model S Plaid, $130,000, via W Supercars. Tesla has been at the forefront of EVs for many years now, and after you set aside their ludicrous acceleration figures, you start to see there is a reason why consumers never praise Tesla for their build quality, especially in the newest Model S Plaid, which is the fastest 4-door vehicle on sale today. Via Motor1.com. Despite its endless amount of panel gaps and paint failures on the outside, the inside is where their Model S falls short of the competition. The excessive use of cheap materials in the cabin, the obnoxious amount of rattles, and technical issues are unacceptable coming from such a vital car from Tesla. Oh, and it has this weird steering stick called the yoke. 8 Lamborghini Ctto Elemento, $2 million, Robocraftgarage.com. Italian for 6th Element. The Ctto Elemento was a fully fledged carbon fiber hypercar destined to dominate on the track, and with a price tag of $2 million and a production number of just 20, only the most important Lambo customers could afford to buy this one. Via Road and Track. Like we mentioned before, when it comes down to these cars, their intended purpose doesn't lie with a fancy interior, but for that huge price tag you don't receive proper seats, just padding slapped onto the carbon bucket seats, nor any floor mats, window switches, air conditioning, and stereo. 7 Alfa Romeo 4C, $70,000, via CarPixel. Alfa's miniature exotic is beloved by many, and for good reason. The 4C is a marvelously designed mid-engined lightweight sports car that receives all of its might from a 1.75-liter turbo 4 that pumps out 240 HP to rear wheels that could propel the little Italian racer to 60 miles per hour from a standstill in less than 4.5 seconds. Via Alfa Romeo. Unfortunately, the interior doesn't live up to its exterior's eccentric personality, since a radio doesn't come as standard, neither does cruise control or floor mats. But worst of all, there is no optional infotainment screen in the middle, and in some models exposed wiring could be noticed throughout the cabin. 6 TVR Sagaris, $118,000, via Wallpaper Cave. TVR is a British car manufacturer that specializes in ludicrously dangerous sports cars, and the Sagaris with its bold colors and side exit exhausts is the perfect example here, but there is one not so special part of it, and that's the inside. Via Pinterest.com. The Sagaris interior wasn't constructed out of cheap materials, it was actually drenched in leather, but the shapes it was sculpted into were just unflattering, and its awkward driving position doesn't help its state of mediocrity at all. 5 Dodge Viper, $95,000, via Haggerty. Dodge has never been well known for their exquisite interiors, but when it came to their death machine of a sports car, the Viper, we were expecting much more due to its near $70,000 price tag when new. But today some low-mileage models have risen to $95,000. Via Barrett-Jackson. Inside, the first-generation Viper was as basic as can be and looked like it was assembled by Lego pieces. The only bits of the cabin which were made out of leather were the seats, pieces of the steering wheel, the shifter, and the handbrake. Furthermore, you'd be touching rough plastic panels that were likely to crack and age like the naked desert on a scorching day. 4 Hummer H2, $60,000. 10 Via Motorcar Studio cropped. Yes, originally Hummers were meant to be off-road monsters destined to conquer any terrain that stood in their path, and no one ever seemed to mind a cheap interior. But when it came to the H2, all GMC actually cared about was its looks, at its rugged capabilities' expense. Via netcarshow.com. We don't want to be unnecessarily mean, but the H2 had a horrendous interior fit for no one. It was small, cluster-filled with useless buttons and gimmicky dials, and not even to mention the awful steering wheel layout. For $60,000, we'd recommend buying literally anything else. 3 Aston Martin Lagonda Series 2, $116,000, via Brett Burke. Aston Martin is the absolute quintessential brand of royalty, but they also had their missteps over the years, like with the Lagonda for example, and this wedged saloon was as ugly on the inside as it was on the inside. Funnyjunk.com. Despite Aston making use of the poshest leather and wood, it was mismatched, was offered in the wackiest color schemes, and spread out the entire interior were these obscure buttons to control the windows, the excuse of an infotainment screen, and an endless amount of other features that not even a 12-year-old could understand. 2 DeLorean DMC-12 via Meckham. Back to the Future, let's rather leave this one in the past. The DMC-12 was of course the hero car in the hit blockbuster, Back to the Future, and it definitely exaggerated the DeLorean's greatness, but one thing, in particular, no one actually had any interest in was the inside, and we can't blame them. Meckham. Back to the Future, let's rather leave this one in the past. The DMC-12 was of course the hero car in the hit blockbuster, Back to the Future, and it definitely exaggerated the DeLorean's greatness, but one thing, in particular, no one actually had any interest in was the inside, and we can't blame them. Via DeLorean. There was nothing stand out about it, it was just constructed out of a plethora of boring and dull plastics and leathers, the exact opposite of what you'd expect such an iconic car to have. 1 2005 Ford GT Haggerty.com. The Ford GT was the perfect interpretation of a retro-inspired supercar, especially the 2021 interpretation, but one thing they neglected with the 2000s Ford GT was its cockpit. The bare metal might have looked cool looking through the window, but once you had to get inside the deep, grippy bucket seat, you were almost suffocated throughout the ride, and not to mention overwhelmed by the 7 different gauges that appeared in front of you and an unreachable handbrake. Via supercoley.net. There is no denying the 2000s Ford GT was an exceptional car to drive, but when it came down to its ride quality and overall practicality,